Why do the powerful fall? Often not from the sword of their enemies, but from the treachery of their own tongue. In a world where words are cheap, silence becomes the currency of kings. Today, we unravel the art of silence, Machiavelli's philosophy on strength. This is not a lesson in weakness, but in dominance concealed. Power is never secured by strength of arms alone. Men think that victory lies in the sword, yet I tell you, the tongue has destroyed more princes than steel ever has. And so we come to silence, not as absence, but as weapon. The clever ruler knows when to speak, but more importantly, he knows when to hold his tongue, for silence is not weakness. It is a shield that conceals, a cloak that confuses, a blade sharper than any dagger. Consider this truth: when you reveal nothing, men imagine everything, and in their imagination you become larger than life, an enigma that they cannot pierce. Enemies prepare for battles they do not understand, rivals strike at shadows they cannot see. Silence denies them certainty, and in politics, uncertainty is poison. Speak too soon and your intentions are known. Remain silent, and every man fears what you may or may not be planning. Fear, as I have written, is a tool more reliable than love, and silence breeds that fear like fertile soil. In the courts of Florence, I witnessed men undone by their own tongues. They spoke freely, eager to prove wit or loyalty, but in their eagerness they armed others with knowledge of their designs. Betrayal became easy, for what is betrayal but the use of your own words against you? Those who trusted silence, however, were untouchable. They left their peers uncertain, and uncertainty breeds hesitation. A man who hesitates is already defeated. Let us speak plainly, silence is the art of concealment. Every ruler, every general, every merchant understands that power lies not only in what is seen, but in what is hidden. To guard one's silence is to guard one's soul. The world expects men to reveal themselves, to chatter, to confide, to boast. This is the weakness of the common man. But the prince is not common. His silence is a fortress from which he strikes only when it serves him. Imagine a council chamber filled with lords and advisors. Some speak loudly, eager to prove loyalty, eager to display knowledge. Their words tumble into the air, creating noise but revealing weakness. And there sits the silent man. He listens, he measures, he allows others to reveal their secrets, their fears, their loyalties. Every word they speak becomes a weapon in his arsenal, and yet he himself has given nothing. He emerges stronger not because he spoke, but because he did not. In silence, he collected power without ever having to grasp for it. Silence also carries the weight of mystery. When a prince is silent, his people wonder. Does he approve? Does he condemn? Does he plot? That wondering keeps them cautious. But when he speaks too often, he is predictable, and predictability in death in politics. Silence makes men second, guess themselves, forces them to reveal more in the hope of drawing words from you. In this way, silence makes your enemies your informants. They speak to fill the void you have left, and in their speaking, they expose themselves. Mark this: silence does not mean passivity. It is not the stillness of a coward. No, it is the stillness of a predator, waiting in the shadows, calculating the strike. A lion does not roar before it hunts. It moves in silence until its prey is within reach. The prince must do the same. Words are to be saved like arrows in a quiver, bent only when they will pierce. To waste them is to leave oneself defenseless. Now consider the matter of allies. Men will come to you, seeking your opinion, your plans, your heart. To reveal too much is to surrender power to them. To remain silent is to force them to reveal themselves. First, they will fill the space you leave, and in that space you find their true nature. Silence is the interrogator's trick. Speak little, and the other man speaks much. He hopes to impress you, to win your approval, but in doing so, he bares his throat. Even in warfare, silence is an ally. A general who reveals his strategy too soon is a general already defeated. Announce nothing. Conceal your movements. Let your enemy live in fear of what he cannot see. In war, silence is deception, and deception is victory. The same is true in politics. Announce your ambitions, and you invite resistance. Conceal them, and you disarm resistance before it begins. Understand also that silence magnifies your eventual words. A ruler who speaks rarely makes every word an event. His people lean forward to hear him. His enemies tremble when he finally breaks his silence. Words that come seldom strike like thunder, but words that come too often are as common as rain. The prince must thunder, not drizzle. His silence must build tension until the moment he chooses to break it. And when he does, the sound echoes across his realm. There is, too, the matter of self-discipline. To be silent when one wishes to speak is mastery of the self, and a man who cannot master himself cannot hope to master others. For what is a ruler if not the commander of his own passions? The fool is a slave to his tongue. The wise prince commands it as he commands his soldiers, speaks only when ordered, and in silence otherwise. So remember, silence is not absence, but weapon. It guards, it deceives, it magnifies. It is a veil behind which power grows, unseen, unchallenged, until the moment of revelation. Men believe that strength lies in boldness, that the one who speaks often is the one who commands. Yet nothing is more dangerous to a ruler than his own tongue. Words, once loosed, cannot be recalled. They escape, they wander, they find ears unfriendly, and in time they return with daggers. Prince who does not restrain his speech will one day find his speech restraining him. Thus, true mastery is not in the sword nor in the crown. It is in the mastery of one's own mouth. The tongue is treacherous. It betrays secrets that even the heart would prefer hidden. In anger, in vanity, in hunger for admiration, men speak more than they ought. They confess plans not yet ready, reveal doubts better buried, expose desires that should remain invisible, and every word becomes a chain that binds them, a path others may follow to unravel their intentions. But he who masters restraint, who knows when to keep silence, becomes master of information itself, and information is the lifeblood of power. Think of a court filled with advisors. Some whisper alliances, others shout schemes, each eager to be heard, each eager to demonstrate their loyalty. Their words spill into the air like coins on a table, and the room is filled with noise. But the man who holds his tongue commands far more than those who speak, for his restraint sets him apart. He appears deliberate, measured, impenetrable. Men wonder what he knows that they do not, what he intends that he does not reveal. His silence makes their noise appear foolish. His restraint makes their indulgence look weak. Restraint is not mere silence, but the discipline behind it. It is the refusal to speak when provoked, the refusal to boast when tempted, the refusal to explain when accused. Every man can speak. Few can resist. That is why restraint is rare and rarity is power. For when a quality is scarce, it is revered. Many can speak eloquently. Few can master themselves to remain quiet. And so the prince who does become something greater in the eyes of others, not merely a man, but a mystery. But do not imagine that restraint is easy. It is among the most difficult arts, for it requires the ruler to overcome himself. To speak is natural, to remain silent is discipline. The prince must resist the flattery of his own voice. He must refuse the bait laid by enemies who seek to draw him into confession. He must smile when pressed, nod when urged, but give nothing. In this way, he denies his enemies both satisfaction and certainty, for certainty is what they crave, and his restraint ensures they shall never possess it. Consider also the weight of timing. A careless man speaks at every turn, and his words lose value. But when a ruler, through restraint, speaks rarely, his words acquire weight. A single phrase from his lips carries more force than 1,000 speeches from another. The world leans in to hear what is seldom spoken. Restraint sharpens every word until it becomes an arrow, and when released, it strikes deeper. Restraint is also a means of governance. When the prince speaks less, his people project more. They imagine his thoughts, they debate his intentions, they fear his judgments. They govern themselves by their assumptions, while he himself remains silent. In this way, restraint saves effort. The ruler need not command every act. His silence compels men to regulate themselves. What is not said becomes more powerful than what is. And restraint protects not only from enemies, but from friends. For a friend today may become a rival tomorrow, and if he has drunk deeply from your confidence, he already holds the blade that may wound you. To give a man your thoughts is to give him power over you. To withhold them is to keep the power for yourself. the prince must remember. Trust no man so completely that his betrayal could undo you. Trust your restraint instead, for it betrays no one. Observe how men often ruin themselves not by what others do to them, but by what they themselves reveal. A ruler confesses ambition to one ally, and soon the kingdom trembles with rumors. Another admits weakness to a friend, and soon enemies grow bold. Yet another reveals a grievance in anger, and his words travel further than he intended, provoking wars he never sought. These are not accidents of fate, these are failures of restraint. He who controls his speech controls his destiny. Restraint also serves in deception. A man who speaks constantly can only conceal so much, for in a flood of words the truth leaks out. But a man of restraint reveals nothing and deceives easily, for silence is the perfect mask. It hides intent, it frustrates inquiry, it forces others to supply answers of their own imagining. In those imaginings, the prince finds both advantage and control. For when men cannot pierce your silence, they shape their own truth, and you may exploit it as you will. Understand this well. Restraint is not an action. It is action disguised. To hold one's tongue while others waste theirs is not to do nothing. It is to act with cunning. It is the gathering of knowledge, the building of strength, the sharpening of weapons unseen. Every word you refuse to speak is a weapon denied to your enemies. Every silence you keep is a fortress against betrayal. Every restraint you practice is a lesson in dominion over yourself and over others. Strength is not only possessed, it is perceived. A ruler may hold armies, wealth, and fortresses, yet if he is seen as weak, all his resources crumble before the ambition of others. Perception shapes reality in politics, for men act not upon truth, but upon what they believe to be true. Thus, silence becomes a weapon once more, for silence magnifies the image of strength far beyond what words could ever achieve. Consider this: the man who speaks constantly, who answers every question, who reveals every thought. He diminishes himself. His words are weighed, measured, dissected, and his strength is reduced with every careless syllable. But the man who speaks sparingly, whose silence leaves gaps, is interpreted as strong. Why? Because men imagine power where they cannot see weakness. They believe in depth where they cannot see shallowness. In silence, a ruler becomes more than mortal. He becomes an enigma. And men fear enigmas more than they fear enemies they understand. Think of the general upon the battlefield. One shouts his orders loudly, revealing his plan to every ear, and soon the enemy counters his strategy. Another stands quietly, gestures with his hand, and his soldiers obey. His silence does not weaken his command, it strengthens it. His troops believe he sees further than they do, that his calm is proof of confidence, that his silence hides mastery. Even if he doubts, even if his plan is flawed, the perception of strength in his silence compels obedience. Men do not follow the loudest voice. They follow the one who seems certain, even when he says nothing. The perception of strength is built not by explaining, but by withholding. When a ruler explains himself too much, when he seeks to justify his decisions with endless words, he reveals insecurity. For only the uncertain seek to persuade with words. The strong persuade with silence, with the simple act of command, with the refusal to debate what has already been decided. Men admire decisiveness, and silence is the companion of decisiveness. Consider how even common men are judged. The one who speaks incessantly at the tavern is regarded as a fool. The one who listens, who observes, who speaks only on rare occasion, he is thought wise even if his words are not profound. Why? Because his silence suggests he knows more than he reveals. That suggestion alone gives him power in the mind of others. The same principle governs princes and rulers. The fewer words spoken, the greater the weight each carries, and the stronger the perception of the man who speaks them. Do not underestimate how much power lies in appearance. The strong man who appears weak invites attack. The weak man who appears strong deters it. Perception bends reality because men act upon their beliefs, not upon truths they cannot see. And so the prince must cultivate silence as a stage upon which others project his strength. When he speaks rarely, men believe his thoughts run deep. When he remains calm in crisis, they believe he commands certainty. When he withholds his intentions, they believe he must be planning something greater than they can comprehend. All of this may be illusion, yet in politics, illusion is as effective as truth. In the councils of Florence, I observed this often. The brash voices, the ones who filled the chamber with noise, were the first to be disregarded, for they seemed desperate to be heard. But the ones who spoke rarely, their words landed with thunder. When they opened their mouths, all turned to listen. Their silence before had built an expectation. Expectation magnified their strength. Even when they spoke the simplest phrase, men nodded as if great wisdom had been delivered. Perception, not substance, gave their words power. Perception of strength also extends to enemies. A ruler who reveals too much of his mind allows his enemies to probe for weakness. They learn his doubts, his fears, his insecurities. But a ruler who speaks little leaves them blind. They imagine him unshakable, even when he trembles in private. His silence robs them of weapons. For how can one fight a man whose intentions are hidden, whose words are rare, whose calm face betrays nothing? They hesitate, and hesitation is defeat. The perception of strength is not about arrogance or volume, it is about control. The prince who controls his speech demonstrates that he controls himself, and a man who masters himself appears capable of mastering others. Self-command inspires the belief in greater command. That belief strengthens his rule, and so silence becomes the instrument by which he builds an image greater than the reality. Men obey not only out of fear of punishment, but out of belief in his superiority. That belief is sustained not by constant speaking, but by rare words cloaked in silence. Even in the theater of diplomacy, silence creates strength. Ambassadors chatter, eager to persuade, eager to negotiate. The prince who listens quietly unsettles them. They reveal more than they should, anxious to fill the void he leaves. And when at last he speaks, they take his words as final, for they were earned through silence. In this way, silence magnifies not only authority at home, but power abroad. Nations themselves bow before the perception of strength. Mark this. Men judge more by what they perceive than by what they know. Few know the truth of a ruler's strength, but all perceive it. And when silence amplifies that perception, strength becomes greater than the sword, greater than gold, greater than law. Power is never safe. To rule is to walk upon a battlefield where daggers gleam in the dark, where allies whisper in corners, where even the smile of a friend may conceal the teeth of a wolf. Princes are not destroyed because they lack armies or wealth, but because they fail to survive the endless struggle that surrounds them. And in these struggles, silence is the armor that shields, the cloak that hides, the refuge that endures when words would betray. Understand this. Politics is a game of constant movement. Factions rise and fall, councils shift, loyalties bend like reeds in the wind. Every word spoken in haste becomes a weapon that can be turned tomorrow. Today's ally may become tomorrow's rival, and the words you shared in confidence will serve as his evidence against you. Men fall not because their enemies were strong, but because they themselves gave those enemies the very means to destroy them. To speak too much is to hand your opponent the rope with which he will hang you. To be silent is to deny him that rope. In the palaces of Florence, I watched this game unfold. A man ambitious for favor boasted of his influence, only to find his words repeated in secret until they reached the wrong ears. Another, eager to prove loyalty, confessed too much to the prince, and when fortune shifted, that confession marked him for ruin. But those who knew restraint, who wrapped themselves in silence, endured through storms. They survived where the talkative perished. Survival is not the crown of the strongest, but of the most cautious. Imagine a council where accusations fly. One man defends himself loudly, another counterattacks with equal fury. Both reveal their fears, their strategies, their hidden wounds. Yet the man who says little, who answers with measured silence, escapes the fire, for men cannot strike at what they cannot grasp. His enemies exhaust themselves, while he remains untouched. Silence in such moments is not cowardice. It is the art of survival. And what of conspiracies? Every throne is surrounded by plots, some great, some small. A careless word can ignite them, a rash confession can fuel them. But the prince who speaks rarely offers no such spark. Conspirators hesitate, for they cannot be certain of his mind. They wait, they delay, they distrust one another, and in their hesitation, their schemes dissolve. Survival lies not in the absence of enemies, for every ruler will have enemies, but in denying them certainty. Silence denies certainty better than swords. Men often seek to tempt the ruler into speaking, hoping to draw from him a declaration, a promise, an oath. To yield to such temptation is to place one's survival into the hands of another. For every promise binds, every oath reveals, every declaration limits. The silent prince makes no such errors. He nods, he listens, he delays. He survives not by satisfying others, but by outlasting them. In the endless struggle for power, survival favors those who endure, and endurance is purchased with silence. Consider, too, the matter of appearances in these struggles. A prince who shouts his innocence when accused appears guilty. A prince who explains himself too eagerly appears weak. But a prince who answers little, who endures slander without flinching, appears unshakable. His silence becomes proof of strength. Men conclude that if he does not defend himself, it must be because he has nothing to fear. In this way, silence itself becomes the most convincing defense. Even in the company of allies, survival demands silence, for alliances are never eternal. Today, two men are bound by common cause. Tomorrow, ambition divides them. If you have spoken too freely in friendship, your words will betray you in rivalry. Better to remain guarded even among allies, for the friend who does not know your heart cannot wield it against you. This is the hardest lesson of survival, to trust sparingly, and even then, never with the fullness of your speech. Observe how the most dangerous moments come not from battlefields, but from councils, chambers, and feasts. Wars are fought openly, but power struggles are waged in whispers. Here, silence is survival. The man who speaks recklessly arms his enemies in secret, while the man who withholds denies them every weapon. Victory in power struggles does not belong to the loudest voice, but to the one whose silence compels others to speak in his place. They reveal themselves, they betray themselves, and he, untouched, survives. Survival is not glory, but it is the foundation of glory. No man can conquer if he does not first endure. No prince can rule if he does not first remain. And in the ceaseless storms of ambition and treachery, the one who endures is not the one who speaks the most, but the one who masters silence. For silence alone carries him safely through dangers seen and unseen, through conflicts of loyalty, through the endless shifting tides of fortune, until the moment arrives when he must act. Until then, he survives because he does not speak. Thus, we have seen the art of silence, not as emptiness, but as strength. The weapon of the tongue is sharp, but the weapon of silence is sharper still. It conceals intentions, commands respect, magnifies authority, and preserves survival in the endless struggle for power. Men fall because they speak too much, too soon, too freely. Princes endure because they know when to withhold, when to let silence do what words cannot. Understand this: silence is not the absence of power, it is its perfection. It is the fortress of the wise, the terror of enemies, the discipline of rulers. In a world where men betray themselves with their tongues, the one who masters silence rules not only over others, but over himself. And he who commands himself commands the world.